Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 242, episode 242 of this program. And it is one of the shows that is part of our self-employment ecstasy series. Our self-employment ecstasy series is a series where we are devoted to those who are self-employed. And we have data that we've shared in our show notes for the series that explains that overall, people who are self-employed tend to have higher feelings of autonomy, a sense of purpose, things of that nature. So we're using all of that good feeling and we're just labeling it ecstasy. So people who are in this series and our target demographic are people who are currently self-employed, and they are, of course, in ecstasy due to that. Not continuous and nonstop of every scintilla of time, but overall, compared to people who are employed by others, tend to have more of a sense of, again, passion and purpose, things of that nature. So we just call that ecstasy. Again, this is not a series addressing how to become self-employed, which is a more common topic. There's a lot of resources out there talking about how to enter into self-employment or how to make that your future, which is fantastic. And we have shows that delve into that and we'll continue to address that. But this is a series that is dedicated to and addresses the issues for people who are self-employed. They're already doing that. And so our show today is a topic that it totally proves the point of why our series is for those who are in self-employment and not for those who aspire to be or who plan to be or exploring potentially being. So our show topic today for episode 242 of Solutions with Courtney Anderson is I have been self-employed my entire career. How do I adjust to working for someone else? I have been self-employed my entire career. How do I adjust to working for someone else? And again, so this is a show topic right squarely aimed at our series population. And anecdotally, I've shared in other programs, and I'll mention again that this has been my experience. I've been self-employed my entire career, and relatively recently accepted a full-time teaching appointment with a wonderful University of Maryland University College. That is my first full-time job ever. And it's probably at a point in life when I think people are headed toward, sort of retirement. I just getting in there, and as I've shared in other programs, that when I went through the onboarding process of accepting the full-time appointment, I've been teaching at universities for almost 20 years. Yet I did so in delineated very narrow job positions, where I would only teach a few classes a year for an institution. So it was set up not to be a full-time employment. So this was the first time I'd ever had full-time employment for somebody else. And as I went through the onboarding and I did the human resources process in the U.S., that's where you address things like benefits, everything from, this is a public school, so it's part of our government, the state of Maryland. So I learned all about the policies that apply to the employees, and I learned about benefits, like leave, or learn the process to fill out your paperwork that you submit for your processing for your work. Filling that out is interesting. I was so excited, and the human resources professional who was having an individual session with me, explaining all the policies and all the benefits and things of that nature. She remarked that I was really enthusiastic, and I was like, yeah, this is exciting, right? Like, and it probably is similar to probably what, somebody several, decades younger probably was that excited at their first full-time position. with benefits, but it was mine. And all that's to say that the show topic today is something that individually speaks to me, and I've certainly been down this path. When you start out very early on and you move into the self-employment arena as your daily activity, then you're used to doing things differently than somebody who's employed for somebody else. And you're also in a really small group. You're not the majority of people. You're the minority of people. And in fact, if you look on the notes, we have, of course, CourtneyAnderson.com. CourtneyAnderson.com is our central website. CourtneyAnderson.com or www.courtneyAnderson.com. I even have my whole name, CourtneyElizabethAnderson.com. Any way that you want to get there, right? But that's our central website. It's where we have the 242 episode pages. We've got show sites, microsites within that domain for all of the shows. So please do come to CourtneyAnderson.com. You can see all of our shows, our video shows that are companion shows to this. We've got articles, a blog, all the information about my media appearances or speaking events, and it's just everything, right? So I'm used to, and we did a show in our Courtney I'm Curious series, which is what it sounds like. People say that they're curious about things. They ask me about things, related to my own journey in life, and I share. And I did a show talking about, starting my law practice, my own law firm, when I was in my 20s. And in that show, I talked about that was my goal. Like before I even went to law school, my goal was to be self-employed. Like that was always my plan. That was where I was headed in life, right? I love entrepreneurship and business, and that was my dream. So I didn't go work somewhere else like full time and then learn all about different things and then transition. I started off in self-employment. And learned a lot of really painful lessons. But way before I opened the law firm, I'd had other ventures, businesses that I'd opened. And I learned a lot of lessons, a lot of things I learned the hard way, but I did learn. And so I've always wanted to be, and then worked and always was self-employed until relatively recently, where I found a fantastic organization that allows my interest and skills to perfectly align with what their innovative educational programs are. And so it's a win-win, which is great because I'm going to walk through a little bit about how that happened in this show, right? So when you've been self-employed your entire career, it's really difficult because you don't actually know what it's like day to day to be other employed, right? So you're not self-employed, but other employed, someone else, some other, not you, but some other employs you. That is a very, very difficult transition. And the group of people we're talking to here in this show are the ones that have never done it. So it's more common that somebody was other employed and then they move to self-employment, and then maybe now they're going to move back to other employment. That's more common, just because the numbers of people that are either completely full-time self-employed are really low. They're low numbers of people that do that. So to have somebody who's been only self-employed and now is trying to transition to other employed you've got really small numbers of people who do that. So one of the things is to be very honest with yourself. You're going to have to find other employment. I'm going to use the term other employment as just the alternative to self-employment because it's pretty clear from my perspective of what we're doing. Self-employment, I work for me, myself, and I. And then other employment is there's some other. It could be a company, it could be another person. It doesn't matter. It's just something that's not me, right? It's other. Hence other employment. And I still tell people, right? For years I've talked to people, and I've even, I've done speeches, and obviously I've been doing speaking events and corporate training sessions, and often people would share that they were less than engaged, they were less than passionate about their work. Sometimes people even would share negative things at a conference I was speaking at, or an event. People would share with me, they'd say, I am not super excited about my life in terms of my work. And I would think, wow. And I would tell people really candidly, I love my work. And then I would say things, and I'd say them humorously, but I meant it. I'd say things like, I have the greatest boss. My organization and the leadership is just phenomenal. I've never had a challenge with an employee evaluation or a management decision. Like, I just, every day I am 100% excited and fired up and all of that. And I meant it because obviously when you're self-employed, then when you're doing employee evaluations, then you're giving it to yourself. So that gives you a whole bunch of flexibility in terms of scheduling because you are with yourself all the time. The managing partner, the managing wasn't a partnership, but the managing lawyer at my law firm was me. I thought they were a great boss. I mean, not all the time. There were certainly many horrible days and bad decisions that I made. I think that I look back and that was a learning process, right? You can't be in two places at once or whatever. Like, you have to learn. But me as an employee of me or owner of my employer, I meant it when I said to people, like, I don't have these days where I wake up and I'm like, oh, I got to go to the boss and I got to deal with the work. Like, I'm like excited and fired up and everything. And that's because I was working for, law office of Courtney Anderson, and then I worked for Courtney Anderson and Associates, LLC. Now, Courtney Anderson Enterprises LLC handles and is the entity on our website, and all the materials you'll see. That's the business entity that owns this this show, right? That I also I think they're doing a great job. I think Courtney Anderson Enterprises LLC is just a wonderful organization. But again, that's because I am in the role of self-employment there. When you look at this idea again of moving from self-employment to other employment, what that usually is that somebody was in a situation like I have been in, where you love your self-employment, everything. You've been doing this for a while. So when you say your entire career, that could be, depending on how, your age and life experience, it could be, that could be 2 years, or it could be, 30 years, or anywhere, whatever. But the longer you've been doing the self-employment, the more you're used to doing things with a lot of autonomy and with a lot of speed, because when you're self-employed, if there's an idea or decision, then you have a process to evaluate it or think through it and do what you can to troubleshoot ahead of time. But the distance between idea, inception, and implementation isn't that far because you don't have that many hurdles. You also don't have that much help. Self-employment, typically, partially because of the structure where if you're the one that's in a leadership position, then there's not far to go between the idea inception and implementation, because you're just like the executive, right? So anybody, even somebody who's other employed, who's like the CEO of an organization or the president of the organization of whatever is in charge, then it's less distance because just by position being in a leadership, just by virtue of being in a leadership position, right? So that's part of the challenge with being self-employment. The other part is you're also, though, not operating under an externally created infrastructure, right? So there's infrastructure, but you also created it. So in addition to the fact that you're in a position that in any organization would make it shorter space, right? You're the leader of the group. The other thing is when it's a self-employed organization that you have control over, well then all of the rules, all of the infrastructure. So it's not like, if you're other employed, even if you're a chief executive, there may be a lot of infrastructure things. You just work there. You work there in a senior position, but you have to follow rules of somebody else is in charge of, right? So you may have an idea, but it may be like, okay, at this organization, here's our process. It needs to be vetted this way. It's got to go through this committee, and it's got to get approved by so-and-so. And so you're still at the you're going to have to do things at the behest of some external entity. When you're self-employed, you get the sort of double speed of being in the leadership position, and you also have the ability to control the infrastructure. Like you may have had a situation where you said, hey, we're going to have a committee, and then we're going to do that. But you may change your mind and think, well, you know what? In this situation, I have an idea, and I'm going to move from inception to implementation, and I'm just going to do away with the committee because I can. So it's really different than other employment. And there needs to be a candid understanding of that, like a real understanding. And the challenge and the difficulty is that if you're someone who's been in this show topic, right? The show topic says, I've been self-employed my entire career. The challenge is you don't know what it's like to be other employed. You have an idea of what it's like. And I have been to literally hundreds of other employment locations because that's where I go to do corporate training and corporate education programs. That's where I go to give speeches and do consulting. Like I'm going to that organization, right? So I've been doing this, going to all these different places, and so I have this great sort of repository of knowledge of being able to compare. I've been in organizations that literally have millions of employees, some of the largest global brands and business entities in the world, and that's one perspective and one type of organization. And then I also would work with organizations that are literally a micro business, right? Maybe it's just one person. And I've been everywhere in between, and I've had the opportunity to work all over the world, right? In North America and in Australia and in Asia and in Africa and in Europe. It's like I'm out and about. So I do have, in many ways, these relatively rare, skills and knowledge bases because I've been literally myself there on site learning, almost like laboratories. Every one of these places I've had the opportunity to go learn about their business and be on the ground and talk and observe and assess and analyze and then create and craft and provide, educational experiences and programs. It's been awesome, right? This is why I love my work. The challenge though is I never had the same perspective of somebody in a more traditional perspective who, at 18 years old, went and got a job at another employment situation and then stayed in that one organization for, until they, until they were 38. They've been there 20 years. So they haven't been all over different geographic regions. They haven't been to all these different size, different organizations and different industries, right? I'm in every type of industry that exists. I'm there. I'm listening. I'm working. And I have other places I've been. So when I'm in a hospital, I've been to other hospitals of a similar size. If I'm at an entertainment business, I've had other clients of the same entertainment business. If I'm in a fashion business, I've had other. So I not only have I done this so long, I've done this in a way that I always have some other firsthand experience with this type of organization. Size, geographic location, industry, all of that. And so that's fantastic. The reality though is I don't have the experience of or comparable to someone who has one organization that they've been at, since, like I said, since they were 18. And even though they're still young, somebody's 38 years old is relatively young by almost any measure. If you've been in that one organization for a really long time, you know that organization better than someone like myself ever would. It's impossible. I couldn't. You've been there 20 years, you know everything about that organization, and you've watched things change and grow, and you have an expertise. This is why many organizations promote from within in terms of moving people up to the senior leadership levels, because the people who've been there a really, really long time and people who've never been anywhere else, especially, they really know that organization and that organizational culture and have assets that are, you literally cannot compete with. They're going to have institutional knowledge. It's just, priceless. So all of these different options and choices that we make in life have benefits and assets. So somebody who'd been other employed at one organization from 18 to 38 has, again, the institutional knowledge and a lot of expertise that other people without that duration at one organization as a full-time employee will never be able to compete with. And what they're going to do is play to their assets and play to their strengths if they ever transition to another organization or if they transition to self-employment. It's the same thing with somebody who was self-employed transitioning to other employment. And this is something I talk about whenever we do career strategy, resumes, job interviewing, all these types of programs. The bottom line I always say is, you got to go with your strengths, and you got to build your entire, presentation and delivery around what are your strengths. If you don't do that, then it's going to be a disaster. So what a lot of people do when they get in trouble with employment, period, right? especially with other employment, because with other employment you have to get hired, right? With self-employment you do too, but it's again it's you, so it's again a shorter distance. So in other employment you hire yourself too, but since you are you, I mean it could literally be like, hey, I have an idea, I'm going to hire myself, and then I might say, okay, then you're hired. And so it happened, like you were hired. There's still a process. It's just again shorter distance, and it's quicker, which could be good or it could be horrible. We don't know what kind of employee that person would be at that self-employment organization. When you're getting other employed, then it's very different because it's not you making a decision about you. It's some other entity making a decision, and then in many instances you have to supply them with an understanding of what does it mean, who are you to them, right? And a lot of these job type situations, they'll talk about your elevator pitch, right? That's the idea that if you were riding on an elevator, how would you describe yourself to a potential employer? What would you do in an interview? What's the first and the last thing you want somebody to remember about you? And then you got to distill your whole professional experience down to something that people can, grab mentally and put in their head. Oh, this person's been a systems engineer, for 31 years. Okay, I'm listening, right? You got to have a pitch, and which is very different again from self-employment, because in self-employment, although you may have a pitch, it's in your own head, and you're the sender and the recipient. So, I mean, in theory, it's an elevator pitch, but the elevator ride lasts forever because you're never going to get off the elevator because you're already like inside of yourself. Other employment, again, totally different skill set. You have to define yourself, and then you have to sell yourself, and you have to close it. And you're not doing those things in self-employment. You're selling yourself and you're closing, but you're not having to define yourself to yourself. You have to define yourself to your customer. So, or client or constituent. Okay. So what do? How do you answer the question? When you come to CourtneyAnderson.com to the show page or URL for episode 242, you'll see my Stone of Solutions. That's kind of where I take my 14 or so points I really want to highlight. And a stone is a unit of measurement, 14 pounds in a stone, so there's 14 points or highlights in our Stone of Solutions. One of the ones I put toward the top was the idea of, look, here's the situation. You need to be really candid with yourself. If you have an extended period of time with one organization and it's self-employment or it's self-employment. So it could be that you work for yourself at just one place, or you work for yourself at lots of different places, but you work for yourself. Then the transition to other employment will have to be crafted specifically around your practices and your culture. Otherwise, it's not gonna work because you're so used to a very different system. That moving to other employment, if you don't put a lot of work, and I mean a lot of work. In fact, you need to approach other employment like another business or another business unit or another business venture, because it is. And you need to think really long and hard about strategizing the goal. What does your employment look like? What does it look like? And this is where you have to be very candid with yourself, because part of the drawback to self-employment is you're getting a lot of feedback from customers and clients and constituents and things of that nature, or peers or professional groups. But you're also missing a lot of the feedback people have at other employment, especially large organizations of other employment, where they get a lot of feedback, and it's not coming from the perspective of a satisfied client, or someone who is a team member that they manage. So self-employment is sort of the worst of other employment, in terms of you're not getting the type, either the breadth or the depth of constructive criticism or constructive feedback that you're going to get at other employment. And it directly goes to what I said earlier. Remember, other employment, even if you're the chief executive officer, the president, the leader, the top person in that organization, you still often, in other employment, have all this other infrastructure that you have no control over, because you're still an employee. So you may have different benefits and compensation structure, but you're still going to have to report to whoever makes the decision about above you, and you don't have the sort of unilateral ability to just do whatever you want. And if you don't believe me, then, go read about what happens to chief executive officers who think they do, and then deal with a board of directors or, whatever infrastructure is already in place to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's very different. But they also are receiving fantastic feedback from a variety of sources to help them be able to have more access to diversity of ideas and decision making. The drawback for self-employment is it's harder for someone who's spent a career in self-employment to even understand how different it is to have less control over all the different aspects of the business. And because even sort of larger size organizations where it's still self-employment. So if they're the founder and they built that business, even though it may be, relatively large in terms of size, you have a very different perspective when it was your baby. Like, you started it, you thought of it. Yeah, it's grown, but in many of those businesses, and I've done a lot of work on site again with organizations like this, as I've worked as an education and consulting and speaking professional. Many times they're literally named after the person. So, like, literally it'll be like the name of the business is that person. And I can't sit here and pretend like I don't understand that that's what I did with, my firms in most instances. And part of it is because it's just the easiest thing to do, right? Like, you're you, and so if it's whatever your business is, whatever widget it is that you're servicing or selling, it's easier to just think, well, I'm me, so I'll just name it, whatever my name is. This is a last name or first name or whatever. So it's common. And it also in some ways then gives you a brand, right? Potentially, depending on how you develop your business. So that's really common. You'll see that all the time, especially with self-employed, smaller size services, plumbing and a nail salon or a beauty shop, a mechanic or garage. It'll, Gary's Garage or, Jim's Barbershop, or it's actually really common. And again, just because it makes sense, like, it's you, and there's so much less space for that self-employed career person. There's so much less space between them, the person. Again, the idea, inception, implementation in the business, it's so close because it's so much of it they have control over. When you do other employment, though, you have this beautiful opportunity to learn from other people, and you have a lot more, again, pre-built infrastructure that you didn't create because you're not the founder, right? You're an employee. So you're walking into something that already was built. When you're self-employed, in our definition, what we're talking about, in most instances, you're walking into something that you built. Even if you acquired that business, like you bought it from some other, it was already a going concern. In many instances, people rename the business, and change it to suit their own interests, right? Because that's the business model you're used to. And you're used to having also, again, this wide array of input, marketing and, information technology, because in many instances, you're making decisions on all this. Now, you're not an expert. You're not an expert in, data analysis of research. Maybe that's not, you're not a number one expert on that, but you know enough of it to understand how to target and retain your customers so you continue to make money. You're maybe not an expert in information technology, but you know enough of it to understand how to get your website up and get your customers be able to send you an email and pay by credit card online or whatever. So you have to learn more of the sort of the basics of your business, because you're either in charge or one of a few people in charge, or you're it. And you have to, and then you'll often just hire out, vendors to do the things that you can't do yourself. But you're going to do a lot of it yourself, because that's just the nature of self-employment. Either in the beginning, or you're still going to have say. Even like I said, even when these firms tend to get, pretty large in size of numbers of staff members, self-employment mindset, you still are going to have input on things because you're used to this, and this is how you've always done it. And again, the risk in this is, it's hard sometimes to understand where your limits are preventing you from fully understanding the what's best. So let's say you're part of your business is you bought some commercial property, and you're going to build a big office building for your business. If it may be at some point, because construction or engineering isn't your area of expertise, that you're making a decision that's not correct or not the best choice simply because you don't know what you don't know. And but people who are in that self-employment, they've been doing this their whole career and profession, you're just used to it. You're used to being your hands in every little part of the business because that's how it started. Or that's how it was when you found it. Maybe it existed, but you were the one that changed it and made it better and enhanced it, and so you're just used to this. So yeah, you expect that you're going to have something to say about all of this because that's what you're used to doing. And somebody who's really adept and really skilled at self-employment and very much in ecstasy because they're feeling good, they understand where better than maybe someone else to bring that vendor in, right? Because at a certain point, it's the time value of money. There's only so many hours in a day, and yeah, even though you yourself could go figure this out or do some of it, it's gonna burn your time. So that self-employment person is struggling constantly with that. The deal when you go to other employment is you have got to understand that and this is very, very important. You don't have that 360 holistic view because there are going to be all of these other interests, and there's an infrastructure that already exists where if you're asked to contribute your idea, then go ahead and do that. Yet you have to change yourself from the process of what you're used to is, hey, there's a question or something that's on the table or a proposal or something that the business is addressing. You're used to by habit and practice. Well, then here's what I think, right? Just because that's what you do. You do not do that in other employment. In other employment, you must respect the infrastructure and you must respect the diversity of other areas of control. You have less autonomy. And the most common thing that you'll see with somebody moving from a career self-employment to bringing on another employment is for what I did. I already have areas that I love in my business and I love, and there's a great way for me through a conduit that I'll never have and don't, it's not even something I would consider. I don't want to build a university. I mean, it's possible, and people certainly do that. That's a business. But it's not anything I want. Like I have, that's way beyond the scale of anything that I would even remotely be of any interest in. I don't want to do that. I don't want to build, a university. Either, go through the process of I don't even know all of the specific nuanced steps, but I know it's incredibly serious undertaking to start a public university, and a person could maybe lead that and work with politicians and governmental authorities and be part of that, but they're not going to own it. It's not it's a government business. It's public. And then there are also around the world in many instances where you can have a private university. In the States they have some, and they often are called them for profit, meaning that they're not part of the government. They're not owned by the people of the place of the jurisdiction. They're owned by a private entity. Could be a person, that does it, or it could be a corporation, or some other business organization. I don't want any of that. It's just beyond anything that I would want to do. So the idea of being able to take the knowledge that I have and the experience that I have and the passion that I have for teaching, about business and law and ethics, and do it in university settings is to me a complementary and wonderful extension of what I already do. Right? It's just awesome. And so having other employment that enriches what I'm doing with my existing businesses and complements them, meaning that in universities for faculty, it's expected that you are current in your industry, and I say expected, I mean it's required that you're up to speed with the knowledge that you're teaching and current in your industry. The licensing requirements, professional licensing requirements for most fields, accounting, for myself as an attorney, there's a mandatory continuing education that I have to comply with, to ensure that I know that I'm up to speed in my areas, where I'm licensed, that I'm providing information. So there are many very specifically unique complementary factors that result in uh, a rather common experience of someone who may have been self-employed accepting university faculty appointments, and it being just an extension of what they do. So you see this in the arts. I have a relative who's incredibly renowned for, I mean, just, I won't, just incredibly well regarded artist, and rightfully so, very successful, that in addition to her continuing with her artistic endeavors, well, she also then, when it's feasible for her, teaches in leading universities. I mean, this is what, in fact, this is sort of what we expect, right? Most leading institutions, universities, is what they do, right? So there's a world-renowned, you know, painter. We have them on staff, and they're teaching painting. There's a world-renowned, uh, you know, actor, and they're teaching in our drama program. I mean, this is very common. And so in those types of situations, you have somebody that has thought and planned and had a strategy and executed, where what they're already doing and their self-employment skills are an asset and even almost expected. I mean, that's what's recruited a lot, right? Uh, and then they accept other employment that is already primed for them to come in and use the full scope of their skills and self-employment, and their knowledge and expertise, and also is structured so that there's a space for them to be sufficiently autonomous. The biggest challenge for somebody moving from self-employment to other employment is autonomy. It's your ability to make decisions. And again, you have to accept. I don't care what you do. And I mean, I'm giving you what I'm sharing, my own personal experience is literally like an ideal and very common situation. You'll also see this sometimes where somebody was a performer, and moved to, so they used to perform with a certain organization, and maybe they were as an independent contractor, and they were one of the top in the world, and now they're part of that as a leader in that theater company. That's very common. Again, you see this, and these again are very specific skill sets I'm giving. But it's, or someone was a former athlete and now they're part of this large, organization, a professional sporting club or team. Again, so it's common in those areas. But those are set up for optimum success, because the other employer who does bring on somebody who's spent a career in self-employment does understand at a basic level that the self-employment person is just used to having a lot of control. They're just used to having a lot of autonomy, because that's just sort of the nature of the beast. And that if you take somebody like that and you put them in a situation where they have no autonomy, it doesn't work. So the thing that's unique about our show topic is that it's more common where somebody is other employed, and then they think they're going to enjoy self-employment, but they don't know, they've never done it, and then they go out and they start some sort of self-employment venture, and then for whatever reason they don't like it, or it doesn't succeed financially, and then they need to quote go back to a job. And so that's more common. You'll see in the show page I found an article that talked about moving from the self-employed worker, and so the link is on the CourtneyAnderson.com episode 242, but it says many employers think of the formerly self-employed worker as someone who is just going to stick around until they can get their business off the ground again. Okay, well, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about somebody who, they were in self-employment ecstasy and then they were unable to stay there and then felt as sort of a last resort, I'll just go work to other employment. That's not what I'm discussing. I'm talking about somebody who most of the time is maintaining some is self-employment, but yet is accepting other employment as part of what they're doing, which also means they're going to have to change. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? So they're going to have, something has to give, and there has to be a reassessment and readjustment when somebody who's self-employed accepts other employment, so that everything, they're able to do it at the level that they enjoy. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about somebody who tried self-employment and did not succeed. We're talking about somebody who was in self-employment and probably still is. but they're either looking to complement what they do, or to access an opportunity that they're not able to do in self-employment. Like I said, unless you want to go start your own university, which some people do happily, but many people don't want to do that. So you'll see again artists, and you'll see a lot of business people. So they have their business, very successful. They still have their business, right? They're still leading that consulting firm or whatever, but they also have accepted often, an opportunity for teaching or some other employment, and it usually is a win-win, because I'm talking about situations where both parties understood what they were getting into. The only times that it doesn't work, moving from self-employment to other employment, is when we're not being candid with ourselves. So I am not at all talking about somebody who's been self-employed but they're unable to stay there. That's a different topic. Because if you're in self-employment ecstasy and you enjoy it, then you're not adding other employment, unless there's something extra. It's sort of like that. It's like a bonus. And so the examples I'm giving are, hey, I've been self-employed my entire career. How do I adjust to working for someone else? I'm giving examples where it's like an extra. If somebody was aspiring to be in self-employment ecstasy and they were unable to do so, then that's a whole different situation. So I'm not talking about somebody who had dreams or goals or aspirations of self-employment, and then they weren't unable to financially sustain that goal, and then they quote went back to other employment. That's a totally different narrative. Those are issues about how to about your business and managing your business and things of that nature. And that would also defeat the purpose of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who's adding bonus other employment to expand or deepen or enrich or complement their existing, I hate to use the term, but success in self-employment. That's why they're at self-employment ecstasy. Again, I said from the outset, this is not how to become self-employed. That's a totally different show. This is not I'm self-employed and I'm and my business is failing. That's a totally different show. This is I'm self-employed in ecstasy and I've been doing it my whole career, and now I want to adjust to working for someone else. And most of the time, these are the types of complementary things I'm sharing, where the person still has their realm, where they're still doing self-employment ecstasy, but they've added this other experience through a university or through a consultancy. Sometimes through public service. You'll see that a lot, where people who are very successful in their field, and then they go and they accept a full-time position in the government because they have such expertise in science, or they have such expertise in technology. They're the chief technology officer, or they have such expertise and knowledge in business or commerce, and so they bring that to government service. That's the same thing, right? Like I'm doing all my self-employment, and now I'm going to accept this other employment, and it may be that I'm going to accept it. Maybe I'll be again this government posting or position for a certain amount of time. Those are usually time limited, or they're set out in time. If a governor asks you to do something, then that person is limited in the U.S. by how long they would be governor, which is the head executive of a state. They're limited by the law usually on how long they could be in that job anyway. So, and it's often that the person still retains some of their self-employment endeavors. They may have to understand that they don't have the ability to do anything that might create a conflict of interest, right? They have to make sure that there's not a conflict of interest, but it's a complement. And in under these parameters, other employment is, again, it's a bonus. It's awesome. It's just another way to take the passion and excitement and enthusiasm and self-employment ecstasy you already, are enjoying, and extend it, or again deepen it, or through these other options through other employment. I have these things that we're describing in this show are 99.9%. They're a win-win. How could they not be? The thing that's a challenge, though, is that the self-employment ecstasy individual needs to really force themselves to sit down and practice mentally through understanding that process, where you've got to restrain yourself from wanting to chime in or move beyond your area that's been pre-delineated of your area of autonomy and expertise. And that is challenging. It's not. I mean, it's not challenging in that the person's not able to do it. It just means that it's so it's something that's so different. And I've been, again, I'm, so fortunate. I mean, what else can I say? But my university, I'd been there for many years, just as a part time faculty member. So I already knew everyone, and I already had a comfort level of trust and respect and admiration in many instances. And I asked a lot of questions to make sure I understood what was expected of me, because one of the things with other employment that is interesting, you have your predefined area where so this is what you're going to do, but in so many ways it's so wonderful, because in self-employment you constantly are monitoring and responsible for everything, right? I just said that earlier. So yeah, you got construction, I'm listening, marketing, okay, IT, listen, tell me this, hiring, give me, like you're just everywhere. It's the nature of the beast. But in other employment, the beauty of it is, the wonder of it all is there's infrastructure, and it's already this institution or organization or company that already has everything set up and defined, and all you have is like a little narrow area. That's your area. And all the things that you normally would be, you know, concerned and worried and trying to problem solve aren't. And it's really interesting. I have to say, so it's just it's nice. It's nice to be able to be part of an organization and be part of it. So there's certain areas of my teaching appointment, in terms of my classes and the things there where I am concerned about every single aspect of that experience. But beyond that, of the whole organization, it's not my responsibility. There's all of this other expertise and knowledge, and all these other officers and experts and leaders, and it's just relaxing and wonderful to be part of something, and to be able to laser focus what your contribution is, and not have to carry the whole institution. It's really very refreshing. And so, like I said, the wonder of it is that with planning, and with a lot of candid honesty, literally to yourself and to the other employer organization, to walk through and make sure that they really understand what you're able to do, what you're comfortable doing, and that you understand that the same. And most of the things that we're describing, they're already set up, and this is very common. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to just be on the team, and it's not where I'm having to think about all of the moving parts all of the time. Now, by nature, most people who have self-employment, they're doing that anyway, because it's just sort of the nature of how their mind works. But it's nice to have all of that support, and just be able to row in the same direction, and not have to, again, just be carrying the mentally and the whole weight of the whole organization in every single decision. It's great. Now, the thing that most of the situations that we're describing in this show, the person who has self-employment, spend their whole career, they usually retain an element of that. So it may be that they, change their schedule a little bit while they're working on some other employment issue, or they and of course, always having to make sure that you don't have a conflict of interest. But they usually retain it. So it's not like I had self-employment my whole career, and now all I have is other employment. Most of the time, it's a blend. It's a blend, obviously, right? And then you have the best of both worlds, because you still have your self-employment, and you are there able to do what you're sort of used to and your habits, and then you have this wonderful other bonus where you're able to integrate all of your knowledge and skills and expertise, and again, enhance or deepen or expand it in a way that wouldn't be feasible without the other employment institution. And it's literally a win-win. It's fantastic. You have to just, though, continue to remember you're the team, and it's nice. And it also gives you the opportunity to have evaluations and get that extra constructive feedback and help you, you learn in ways that you're deprived of and full self-employment without the other employment opportunities. And it really is just a win-win. And you can see why you have this template that we've described in many different instances of people with self-employment ecstasy, careers, and then integrating that into opportunities to serve in other employment institutions, either private sector or public sector. You have projects. Often people are brought in for project duration. And these are just wonderful ways for that person who's so used to all of the, yeah, with all the autonomy and control, you also then have all that responsibility and all that stress. I mean, you know, that's the reality of it. And it's nice to not be in that position and to be contributing in your area where you're given the autonomy and on your project or your class or whatnot, and then still stretch yourself and lead, but yet to be just simply part of something larger than yourself, that allows you to do things you never would be able to do by yourself. And it also, again, enriches and enhances you and it exposes you to what it's like to be part of something where you're going to get that great constructive feedback from other people that you really respect and admire professionally. It's just a win-win. So how do you adjust? Again, you need to start the adjustment way before you even, enter into exploring specific other employment opportunities. You need to ask yourself in your mind, I'm going to have to scale something differently to allow the other employment work to be met appropriately. I'm also going to have to change the way that I'm used to just immediately absorbing everything and problem solving and moving so swiftly to act and learn what it's like to not have that kind of pressure all the time. The beauty of other employment is just fantastic. You have your area of autonomy and leadership, and then you also have this great opportunity to learn from other people all the time, and to not have all of the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's just wonderful. And again, you need to blend it so that it works for you. And so that you calibrate, so that your time and so that your attention and everything is in a way where you're not burning out, right? Burnout is the big fear that we all have for that. And you have to really speak up and be clear to your own self-employment goals and infrastructure and stakeholders, and to your other employment organization. And I ask a lot of questions. I'm sure that in some instances people might think, wow, she really asks a lot of questions. Well, but the thing is, I have to, because I need to really understand what's expected. What does it mean, for the employee, or what do you want me to do on this in this meeting, or what would you expect from me? And I ask the question so that they'll tell me, because otherwise I wouldn't be totally confident that I'm doing what's expected, because this is a new experience, and it's wonderful, and I hope to continue to be so engaged every day, and to balance self-employment with other employment in a way, again, where the same knowledge and skills enhance each other. And I take things from in my experience, from my classroom as a professor, teaching graduate business students and graduate students. I take that and I share knowledge from the academic side with clients when I'm doing consulting or speaking or program. It's just in the synergy and the ability for me to learn more, and it's just wonderful. So the answer is, how do you adjust? You will adjust if you craft the solution built around your skills and experiences and your practices. You are not going to adjust if you think you're going to move from 100% self-employment to 0% self-employment and 100% other employment, and you lose all of the things that you're accustomed to. You're just not going to be realistic, and you really need to ensure that the other employment opportunity is ideally suited for what you're used to. In other words, somebody who's come from self-employment is used to making a lot of decisions. We've talked about that, but they also are used to having, the ability, they can say no. uh, and they're the ones who are comfortable that we're not doing anything that's unethical and things of that nature. So when you do other employment, somebody who comes to other employment from self-employment has to, and I do mean has to, investigate to ensure the leaders, the peers, subordinates of that other organization are ones that you believe in, that they align with your ethical values, they align with your beliefs, because it's not going to work if you don't do this, because you're not going to have the tolerance, and you're not going to be used to being in a situation where something might be happening, or even just that, even if you didn't respect the individuals at the other employment organization, it wouldn't work, because you're not used to being in a situation where you're doing something and you don't respect your leaders, or you don't you're not excited and passionate. You're not used to that. So your tolerance is really low because you've never done it. And if you got into a situation and you just said, I'm going to leave all of my self-employment, I'll just never ever do any of that, and I'm going to go to all this other employment, and you don't investigate all of the people at that organization and ensure that that they match your own internal ethics and integrity, it's not going to work, because you're not going to tolerate something. And of course I'm speaking as someone who, if they've spent a career in self-employment, usually is financially independent, and has they're not, the other employment, they're not doing it because again, income. They're doing it because it expands and it enhances and expands what they do already, and they already have their other income, their self-employment, all their other diversified resources. So they're not going to stay somewhere where they're unhappy. It's just not going to happen, because they don't, nobody should, and we spend a lot of time talking about that. But the self-employment person, they totally won't. And as we wrap up the show, it's sort of like an anecdote, right? If you have two people and they're older, and they both have their own apartment, right? And something goes wrong, then let's say they have an argument, then they'll probably just say, well, I'll just go back to my own apartment. Like, I don't have to stay here and have you, be mean to me. I can just go back to my apartment. That's why I have it. So it gives you that option. You're used to it. And that's sort of big picture. The person moving from a career of self-employment that they've quote succeeded, then they're doing this other employment because they really want to. That's why these people are very passionate, they're very enthusiastic, they're very committed, they're doers, because they're used to that. That's what they've been doing, and they're really excited to enhance and broaden and expand what they do through this fantastic opportunity. And like I said, 99.9% of the time it's a huge success. Everybody is better off by it, right? And these things are wonderful. It's just, if somebody doesn't investigate the organization and the individuals, make sure, okay, that's somebody I really respect, that's somebody I'd love to be part of their team. If that's done, the due diligence, then you adjust by using your autonomy within your still existing self-employment endeavors, using your autonomy within your clearly defined other employment area of leadership, and then you have to work at it. Keep paying attention and pull back. Because remember, in the other employment situation, no matter what you've done or what you bring to the table, the institution already has things set up. So you don't have to come up with, ideas and suggestions for everything and take ownership of it, because it's a team, and you have your area well defined, and then and that's where you lead. And then you need to ask for help. And go to your boss, your supervisor. It's been so exciting. I'm so fortunate, and ask questions and get mentoring. And so it's and then again, like I do, as we close this show, really recommend that you retain, and in balance, of course, some self-employment, so you still are used to having your area where you do sort of what you've done your whole career, right? And then you balance that with your other employment tasks and duties, and it complementaries wonderfully. It really is a wonderful way for you to enhance your knowledge, and again, be exposed to things that you haven't been exposed to, in some ways, being in that restricted self-employment world for so long. So this is a broadening bonus, wonderful win-win. But there's a lot you need to think through, and you must investigate the organization, but the people that you're going to be reporting to ensure that they align with your integrity. And when you find that, I've been so fortunate to find that, well, then it's wonderful. It really is. You get all these mentors, friends, new professional colleagues. It's just fantastic. But you must enter this appropriately, and then continue to ask questions, like I do. I ask questions sometimes. It may sound silly, but I keep asking because I want to make sure that I'm learning and fitting in to the team. So, congratulations on your self-employment career. Congratulations on adding a bonus other employment opportunity. Continue to let me know at CourtneyAnderson.com any ideas or feedback that you have. Please leave ratings or reviews on Stitcher or iTunes or Libsyn or iHeartRadio or anywhere in the world you're finding our show. Check me out. Is that the term? I'm not sure. On Twitter at Zealous Business. And I look forward to you taking part in another future show and potentially taking part in some of our upcoming seminars and webinars and workshops. Thank you so much.